All right, I'll start with the attendance. Mr. Haw,
Yes, go ahead. Yes.
Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Mr. Dance,
Yes.
Ms. Kaminsky. Oh, are you here?
I'm here. Can
Okay,
you not hear me?
We can
we
now.
can now.
Oh, okay. All right. Sorry.
Mr. Peterson
Here.
and Ms. Goodman. All right,
Was Jeff here someplace?
I'm here.
Okay. So I'm just looking, I'm thinking we are missing somebody, aren't we?
Karen and Andrew.
What was that, Jeff?
Karen, Andrew, and Mark. And we're one short on the board right now because we're gonna put 2 county commissioners on the board as opposed to 3. And I just emailed Andrew that because apparently he contacted you and you were under the impression that the board was full.
Well, I mentioned that to him because I know by the bylaws, it takes 3 county commissioners.
No, I don't think there's a need for 3. I don't know if that's, I know at
Okay.
one time there was a concern over that. I guess we can discuss that later this afternoon or something, but
Well, I
at the
think
moment,
maybe-
I'm looking for 2.
Jeff, I think you might be right. It might be mentioned at least 3 or
Up to.
up to 3, yes. I think that's how it reads. So anyway, you contacted Andrew then?
I just emailed him literally before I dialed in for this meeting, and because he's a valuable asset, we need to keep that communication going to the best we can with
Excellent.
the
Yes,
casino.
I did tell him what you told me because of what I was thinking.
Yeah.
So that's good. Okay, roll call is done. Our next job for this meeting is election of officers. So let's get started with a chair. Could I have a nomination for a chair for this coming year's county board?
I'll nominate Gerald Hoff for the chair of the airport authority.
And I was thinking about this a long time. I'm going to go ahead and decline.
You're killing me, Jerry.
I'm killing you. Well, you know, it takes a lot of effort and work and everything else to go ahead and do this and be prepared and so on. But if you guys want me, I will do it again for a while.
I think you do a great job at it.
I'll second that nomination.
Okay, we'll give it another try then. We'll go forward.
Thanks, Jerry.
Okay. So I heard a nomination and a second. Julie, could we have a roll call for a vote?
yes, Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Ms. Kaminsky. Can't hear you again.
She's nodding her head yes.
Okay, Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Dance,
Yes.
and Mr. Haw.
Yes. Okay, moving on.
Point of order, please.
Say again?
Ms. Kaminsky, it's nice to see you, but are you an official member or a visitor?
She's an official member.
I was unaware of that. Welcome.
Oh, okay. Yes, she's an official member. She's good for 3 years with us.
Good to know.
Cindy, we can't hear you at all, but it doesn't show you're muted.
Still can't hear me?
Now we
can hear
can.
you.
Oh, I really have to yell. Okay.
Maybe you've got to be certain distance from your microphone.
I have to be really close here.
Yep,
There you
now we
go.
can hear you.
Okay.
Loud and clear. We're only seeing your eyeballs too, just so you know on the screen.
I'm at the office. Screen to sit so high.
Well, you
Can't
gotta
tilt
get
it.
a push.
Sorry.
Okay. Could I have a nomination for vice chair I'm going to make a nomination for Mr. Peterson.
I'll second that.
Bill is seconding that.
Who seconded it?
Phil
Mr.
did.
Suda?
Bill,
Okay.
Julie, can I have a roll call on that, please?
Mr. Dunst,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Okay,
Mr. Ha,
Yes.
Mr. Shuda,
yes.
and Ms. Kaminsky.
She's
Okay.
nodding her head again, yes.
Are you on a computer or are you on like your phone?
Yeah, I'm on my computer at work.
Okay. I just wondered if your microphone was covered for some reason.
B,
Sounds fine when you're really close. So when you do go to talk, just sneak up to the
speak
computer, I
up really
guess.
close. Okay.
Yep.
There you go.
Julie, did you collect her vote?
Yes, we're all set with the vice chair.
Okay. Now for the treasurer. I'm not quite sure how that goes because we want to have Susan there, so should I simply make a motion to, I make a motion that Susan Zelinski continues as our airport authority treasurer?
That's
I'll
how it's been
second
done in the
that.
past. Yep.
Okay,
I'll second that.
okay. Julie, could we have a vote on that, please?
Ms. Kaminsky,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
yes,
Mr. Ha,
Yes.
Mr. Dance,
Yes.
and Mr. Suda.
Yes.
Now for the next item on secretary, I will make a motion for Mr. Don's Jeff to be our secretary, and that entails basically signing the minutes. Correct?
That's all it's been for me so far.
Okay. And should I also add on to that to include Julie as our recording secretary and to continue as that, in that function? Or should I keep them separate?
Probably separate.
Okay, back off on that last motion. Just follow through the motion of leaving or nominating or appointing Jeff as the secretary. Can I have a second on that, please?
I'll second that.
Julie, could we have a roll call for the votes?
Yes. Mr. Dance,
Yes.
Mr. Ha,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes,
Mr. Shuda,
Bill?
Yes.
and Ms. Kaminsky. Said yes.
Yeah, she's,
Okay.
right.
Gonna
And
need
now
to get her a Sears and Roebuck to elevate her a little bit.
they don't make Sears and Roebucks anymore.
Well, we'll find one.
You're
Apple
gonna be a
buy.
long ways to find one. I think you'll find one in a museum nowadays. Moving on, I would like to make a motion to continue with Julie Schmeling as our recording secretary for the airport authority. Do I have a second on that?
I'll second that.
Okay. Julie, could we have a roll call for the vote?
Ms. Kaminsky,
Yep, she's
Okay.
got a thumbs up.
Mr. Ha,
Yes.
Mr. Dance,
Yes.
Mr. Suda,
Yes.
and Mr. Peterson.
yes,
Jeff, just on Andrew, I presume the county commissioners have to approve him again for another 3-year term?
That's correct, but because we could have made an appointment, but to do things as we've done in the past, we needed to advertise it again.
Oh,
And today's the 11th, if I'm not mistaken, and I think today might be the deadline to get the application in. So I'll tell you, if you could please give him a, reach out and contact him again today. I'm not so sure that he is put in by the sound of the note that he has put in. And again, he was probably not aware, as you were not aware, that we're looking to fill that slot and keep Andrew on board. That's when Mark vacated, I took over Mark's unfulfilled term. And Karen was re-up for 3 years. We put Cindy in the position that I had because mine needed to be renewed. And then Andrew's spot needed to be renewed for 3 years.
okay, I'll give him a call this afternoon then.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item, approval agenda. Everyone, I believe, has seen the agenda. Any comments, changes?
We do need to change number 10 and 11. I have them out of order. If we could put old business / unfinished business as number 10, and then number 11 will be new business.
Okay, could I have a motion to approve the agenda per what Julie said? Or
As
which-
amended, so moved.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
Yes.
Julie, could we have a vote? Roll call.
Who was
vote.
the second? Was that Phil?
Bill.
Okay. All right, on the agenda, Mr. Shuda,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson. You're muted.
Yes,
Okay. Mr. Ha,
Yes.
Ms. Kaminsky, and Mr. Dunns.
Yes.
Okay, next item, public comment, but we have no public to my knowledge. So we'll move on to item 6, which is approval of the minutes. I assume everybody has gotten a copy of the minutes from our last meeting, has had a chance to review it and look at it. And I did notice that the one item that Barry noted last time, reference to the trial balance where we had a total liabilities listed in there for 30,000 some odd dollars, where it should be 0, and that's been corrected. So otherwise, I don't see anything else in my mind that needs to be adjusted or corrected. Do I hear a motion to approve as presented?
Yes.
So moved.
Second?
Yes.
Okay. Julie, could we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Mr. Peterson,
abstain. I wasn't here. I don't know.
Mr. Ha,
Yes.
Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Mr. Dunns,
Yes.
and Ms. Kaminsky.
You
Can't
guys hear me?
Now we can.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I'm not sure how to vote, so I'm so new. So I don't know if this is correct or what, but from what I'm looking at, the correction, apparently I would say it looks okay, but not, it being new, I'm not.
Do I put her as a yes, or would I put her as an abstain because she wasn't here?
She can vote yes.
Okay,
I guess so can I. If she can, I can too.
all right, we're all yeses.
Well, you guys are on board today. Okay, moving on. Next item on the agenda is the treasurer's report. I'm looking at the December 2020 accounts payable page. I don't see anything in my mind to ask and go on. Is there any comment? Everybody, I presume, has had a chance to look at it and review it. And if there's any questions, so be it. Go ahead and ask. Otherwise, waiting for a motion to approve it.
Yes, I would just ask, does Susan have any comments in regard to this at all or not? Is she good
Not-
with it?
I'm good with it, except for, when we get a little farther, if Julie or whoever's sharing the spring could go to the next one. Yeah, So I added a line down below where it says miscellaneous state reimbursements. So I added that this year to track those. So on the accounts payable, you'll see that there was that $6,238.75 that we paid out. That's going to be reimbursed. So that line should now tie to the state reimbursements that we get. That way we can track it to see what we spent versus what's been reimbursed. And that way at the end of the year, we'll know what's still outstanding with the state. So I separated those out because otherwise they were all running under miscellaneous PFC, which really isn't the right way to do that because the PFC account is the money that we have to take out and reimburse the county back for, because those are funds that will not be reimbursed. And that's part of that PFC account. That's that separate cash line. But other than that, everything else is fine. But I just wanted to point that out. Any questions on that?
Not right now. We'll have to.
Okay. So like if you go back up to
further,
the
but-
accounts payable, you can see that there's that $6,238.75. So that was for the
PFAS.
yeah.
Yes,
So we should get that reimbursed back versus that ALP update project, the airport layout plan. That was our cost. So that will not be reimbursed. And that needs to come out of that PFC cash account. So that's all, just separating them out a little bit better so we can better track those items.
well, good, thank you.
Yep. Other than that, everything's pretty normal. Nothing outstanding.
Any other questions, comments? Otherwise, could I have a motion to approve as presented?
So moved.
Second, please.
Second.
Julie, did you hear that? Phil approved or seconded?
Okay,
Could we have a roll call for vote?
yes. Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Ms. Kaminsky. Mr. Peterson,
Yes,
Mr. Haw,
Yes,
and Mr. Dance.
Yes.
okay, moving on to the December 2020 revenues and expenses and the trial balance sheet. And the other summary on fuel sales. The back portion of that handout. Any comments, questions? If not, could I have a motion, please, to approve it as presented?
So moved.
Okay, Phil has made the motion. And Jeff, did you second?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Julie, could we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Mr. Peterson,
yes,
Mr. Dance,
Yes.
Ms. Kaminsky,
Yes.
Mr. Haw,
Yes,
and Mr. Suda.
Yes.
okay, moving on. There has, to my knowledge, no executive committee meeting or budget committee meeting or capital projects committee meeting. But we do have to reestablish new committee members for 2021. So for the executive committee, we have 3 positions to fill. We can, at my suggestion, maybe leave the same members on the executive committee and approve that as is, or go ahead and make nominations for new people.
Jerry, I don't know what the bylaws say, but I think you probably, as the chair, can make the appointments for those committees unless somebody declines your appointment.
Say again, Jeff?
I said, I don't know what the bylaws say in regard to this, but my guess is you can, as the chair, can make the appointments to the committees unless someone who has been appointed declines the nomination or the appointment.
I believe that is the case, yes.
Okay, well, then I will go ahead and make the appointment for the executive committee. Myself, Barry Peterson, and you, Jeff. If that is okay with everyone, I would like to hear a motion stating that.
No, you don't need the motion on it. That's just an appointment from the chair unless the
Okay.
bylaws state differently.
Okay. Does anybody have any objection to what I just mentioned for members of the executive committee? If not, so be it. Our new committee members for the executive committee for 2021 are myself, Barry, and Jeff. Now for the budget committee, I'm going to go down through the list and I'm going to plan on Andrew being here. So I'm going to leave him on the budget and myself on the budget. And now we have to pick another one for Mark. Does anybody want to volunteer to be on the budget committee? If not, I will appoint. Cindy, would you like to give this a try? Yes?
Jerry, if I could chime in, generally, we like to have a county, at least one county commissioner on that, since
Okay,
we, part of our budget is our request up to the county. So sometimes that facilitates that conversation if a county commissioner has been involved in all of the committee discussions.
okay, that makes it perfect because I forgot about Karen. So I'm going to appoint Karen to the budget committee. So we'll have Andrew, myself, and Karen. If everybody's in agreement with that, I'll say so be it. Julie, do you have all that?
I do. I just have a question. Can I reflect in the minutes the part about Andrew being on it, even though he's technically not on the board at this time?
I think it would be proper to leave that third position vacant for the time being.
Okay.
I concur, Barry.
I concur too, because we don't know whether he's indicated he wants to do it or come back onto the board, but he hasn't gotten the paperwork and we haven't got it all together. So it's better to leave it off.
Okay.
We can fill it in next time around. Okay, no bylaws committee, and as we've got there noted, we will set up a committee as needed down the road. Capital Projects Committee. Right now, we have myself, which I will stay on there if there's no problem with that. And again, Andrew was a good one on that, but we'll leave that vacant like we just did with the Budget Committee. And then also Phil. So if no one that I've just appointed has a problem with that, we will continue with the Capital Projects Committee as situated. Okay,
Don't we have the, oh, never mind. Forget it.
what?
Nothing.
Well, say it now. I'm going to be wondering.
I was thinking of the ad hoc committee. We don't
Oh,
have to,
okay.
we don't need to do anything with that right now, correct?
We might just as well. I've got it on my notes here.
Okay,
So for the ad hoc committee, I've surveyed several people. And Phil has offered to be on the ad hoc committee. And this ad hoc committee we're talking about, just a reminder, that's to review what we want to do for rental cars and what kind of requirements we would like to see somebody offering rental cars have with their vehicles. And also to kind of start looking at what regulations and rules and so on we want to put together for somebody doing commercial sightseeing. Such as we got the one person out here that's been talking about doing that as a sideline. So I got, as I said, Phil. And Barry has mentioned that he is willing to do it. And Andrew has also mentioned that he would do it. And maybe as a co-person, I would be willing to sit in there also. So right now, let's put myself down, Barry down, and Phil down, and we'll see where Andrew goes.
okay.
Thank you, Julie. Okay, moving on. The next is the airport's director. Barry, it's all yours.
Okay. Let's see if I can find. Nope. And this is the right one. Okay, thank you. So starting off, no official accidents or incidents to report, although I will mention, Phil brought it to, reminded me earlier before the meeting that we did have an aircraft that upon landing, a private general aviation aircraft, upon landing had a flat tire, which closed down the runway for a few hours one day recently. So I don't think that technically meets the definition that the FAA puts around this topic, but thought I'd mention it since Phil reminded me of that. The second item here is just kind of where we are summary. And Cindy, since you're new, a lot of things to absorb. Especially as I go through some of these things, especially things that we've been talking about for months. So I'll maybe spend a little bit more time explaining some of the background on this, but there is in federal statutes a maximum subsidy cap for essential air service, and therefore we needed last year about 2,800 total passengers, which in a normal year is not even remotely an issue, but with COVID and shutdowns and everything, we ended up around 3,300. So assuming everything gets reported correctly to the FAA, that should not be an issue. And if it doesn't get reported correctly, then it becomes an issue that I need to get fixed. At the end of the calendar year, as we're probably all aware, the federal legislature and the president eventually worked out a relief package and funding bill. There is some money for general aviation airports, and because of our size and how they define things, we get lumped into the general aviation side for that bill. In the last round in the spring, we got about we got $30,000 as a result of that. Given the dollars, I'm estimating that we'll get an additional 10,000 this round. So that's kind of unanticipated funding. The formulas haven't yet been published, so that's kind of just a you take what was in the spring bill and divide it by the size of the amount allocated, and you end up with roughly $10,000. So as that works through the process, I'll keep you updated. Manistee Township Master Plan and Zoning Update. So kind of going back a ways here, this isn't something that we've talked about recently, although it has come up in the past for members that have been on for a few years. But the state zoning statutes basically require local zoning authorities to implement certain aspects in their zoning ordinances to protect airports. And going back in history, when Manistee Township updated or rewrote essentially their zoning ordinance in 2008 or 2009, for some reason they removed all of those required protections for the airport. I started here in late 2008. It didn't come to my attention really until a few years later. So I've met and brought it to the attention of the township zoning administrator, Guy Finout, and that was probably now 5 years ago. And also brought it to the attention of the county planner, Rob Carson, or former county planner now, because the current recommendation at the state level is not to do airport zoning piecemeal at the township level, because the impacts of zoning technically span out from the airport 10 miles in all directions. So that touches multiple different townships. Now, the farther you get away, the impacts become very minimal, unless, you're building, 10-story structures or things like that, which we don't have in our area. Rob Carson kind of pursued that and just felt that the time wasn't right politically for a county overlay zoning for the airport, just because of the view of the local townships and how they look at their rights around zoning. So then that kind of focused things back onto Manistee Township. And Manistee Township decided that they were going to, with the activity along the US 31 corridor, to start a process of updating everything. So the first part of that was updating their master plan. They started that probably 18 months ago. I know a little bit more than a year ago. Then COVID hit, and that kind of ground that whole master planning process to a halt. But I was working with the county planner. Oh, and one important part there is the township contracted with the county planning department to do that updated master plan. So with that, I got all of the information that I get funneled from the state as to what is appropriate for local zoning and master plans as it relates to airports. And that got worked into the draft master plan. Last week, I got a call from Karen, and I can't think of her last name right now, because I guess Guy Finout is retiring as township zoning administrator as of the end of December. And Karen, who was the assistant, is now planning on either officially or will be taking over that role. And she basically said that the Township Planning Commission has concerns about the language that is being included in the master plan as it relates to the airport, because they feel it's going to cause limitations on potential growth in the 31 corridor. And The Township Planning Commission is planning on holding a special work session this Wednesday where they've asked me to come and explain all of this stuff about airport zoning, which I really know very little about, other than what gets fed to me at state conferences. So I've reached out to the state, trying to get them involved. I've also reached out to Prina Newhoff because they're more familiar with some of these issues. So right now, assuming that the state isn't going to be able to join in on a call on Wednesday evening, myself and Bob Nelson from Prina Newhoff will likely be the two people attending this township zoning to really explain why this is necessary. And I believe where it is coming into play is the new assisted living, senior assisted living development on the north/west side of 31, kind of across from the hospital. If the proper zoning that legally should be there was in place, that use probably would not be allowed in that specific area because it's considered high density residential. So I think that's driving some of these questions as that development has future phases planned, that these updates could impact that. So unfortunately, because the township, over a decade ago, failed to follow through and do what they were obligated to under state law and removed important pieces of zoning, they're now potentially in a bind where they're now going to be forced to add them back, and that may have negative impact on development. And again, the things that get impacted are higher density residential type type developments, because the idea is you don't want people living right underneath the approach of the airport. Working there and doing business there, having factories there, all of that stuff's okay. It's, as it relates to zoning, it's actual people living. So that's just kind of an update. I will keep you all updated as we work through this process, but I wanted to bring that all to your attention. Are there any questions?
Barry, this potentially could affect the direction aircraft take off and land here, right?
No, it ultimately wouldn't impact that. It might limit the types of aircraft that can utilize our airport. I don't think that's necessarily what, I don't think these types of things will have that limitation because these types of things can be grandfathered in. So, I don't think it necessarily impacts what's currently complete or nearly complete. I think where it gets a little more dicey is at future phases that haven't yet been started.
Okay.
Okay.
Is that a public meeting, Barry?
It should be, yes. I don't yet have information. I believe it is planned to be an in-person meeting at the township, although I've requested both if the state can attend, because they're not allowed to attend in-person meetings, or for Prina Newhoff that there be the ability to call in. So if anyone is interested, send me an email and I'll make sure you get the meeting information. And it's entirely possible I've been waiting for the state to get back to me and they haven't. So I need to get back with Karen and just see if it makes sense to have this meeting or if we should postpone it. Any other questions on that?
No.
Okay, the next item is 3 years ago, the state went through a process as part of a kind of statewide aviation planning exercise where they released for every airport in the state a document that basically showed the economic impact of every airport in the state. And that data has been updated and brought current. And at the time, the first version of that showed that our airport had $100 million of economic impact to our region, which I felt was a little bit on the high side. There's basically a computer formula on the back end, and there's surveys that I fill out that talk about businesses that are impacted and jobs that are dependent on the airport, et cetera. And then those get plugged in and voila, out comes some numbers. So I tried to be, now that I kind of understood my answers and how they relate, I tried to be a little bit more conservative this time. So the new version of this shows a $41 million impact of the airport, which I think is more in line with reality. I think the first version was a little bit, but it's very much open to interpretation when answering some of these surveys. I've already shared this with our economic, oops, Karen is trying to get in. I don't know how long she's been waiting. Sorry, Karen. So I've shared this with our economic development office at the chamber. So Mark has it, and so it can be utilized however appropriate going forward. And I also included the full version. I just kind of have a half of the full page in my presentation here. The full version was in my email this morning. Any questions on that? Okay, then, yep, that's next. So looking at our passenger numbers for December, the final numbers that came in for December, we had a total of 349 passengers, which compares to 523 a year ago, 600 the year before, 700 the 2 years before that. So roughly half of where we historically have been in recent years in December is what we ended up, which is a little bit better than the national average right now. National average is around 40-45% of year prior. But it's also the least number of passengers since Cape Air has started. So, they started with 500 in October, just shy of 400 in November, and then 350 now in December. And specifically, a lot of that December number is due to the conditions and the retrenchment in the state that started kind of in the middle of November with restaurants closing and all sorts of restrictions put in place, and in general an overall message that says basically you should not travel over the holidays. So I think we definitely saw that impact our numbers in November and then again in December. We'll see where January takes us. So far, I'm encouraged, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. Then going down on the performance. So we had 6% of our flights canceled in the month, which total of 124 flights meant that 8 flights were canceled. And for a variety of reasons, the bulk of those flights happened Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. So the 2 afternoon and evening flights on Christmas Eve, and then all flights on Christmas Day ended up getting canceled. So 6 of the 8 happened in that one period. And there are a variety of reasons that occurred. part of it was the timing and availability of alternate crews to ferry planes around on the holiday. As a result of that Christmas, I'll call it a meltdown, because naturally the holiday is not the time you want to be canceling flights because it impacts people in very specific ways. And there were a lot of very unhappy people those 2 days. I reached out to Cape Air, and as a result of that conversation, there was last week on Wednesday, I believe it was, a meeting scheduled that myself and Jerry and actually Brandon Jensen from our marketing group participated from our side. And on Cape Air side, it was basically their upper management team. So their current president, their founder, Andrew Bonney, their VP, who we generally work with, the regional manager for our station, and then the marketing director for Cape Air were all part of that meeting to basically talk about some of these issues, but also more broadly kind of give an update as to, we're 3 months into our service, just kind of give an overall service update. But a lot of the time was spent on specific issues. So that's going on, and I'm going to be talking more about those issues later on in my presentation. On the delay side, there are more delays than I'm comfortable with going on right now. I've identified getting the morning flight out on time as being a significant cause of that. Generally, those morning delays are on the order of a half hour, and their schedule is padded fairly well that you can leave here a half hour late and still get into O'Hare pretty much on time. So it's not causing a lot of inconvenience, a lot of those, but there are some root cause concerns on basically operations and getting going in the morning that I've raised to them, especially since we've had a very mild winter and weather is not the contributing factor that it would be potentially in a normal year. Any questions on any of that?
How many passengers were affected on those canceled flights on Christmas and Christmas Eve? Approximately.
Those, I mean, generally those were flights that were fairly full. So I would say probably across the 6 flights, probably about 30 passengers.
30 unhappy people.
Yep. And we've heard about it, as we tend to whenever someone gets inconvenienced. But when it happens on a holiday and someone's trying to get home for the holidays, it's more very specifically an issue. So, any other questions? Okay, I'm going to attempt to rotate this, but I think what it ends up doing is it rotates all my slides. So when I go on to the next slide, I'm going to have to rotate again. So this is my monthly airfare report. So again, for new people, basically these tend to be the top 20 destinations from Northern Michigan. I generally use Traverse City's data as to what are the top travel destinations to Northern Michigan. And then I basically, each month before the meeting, basically go out and see through the publicly available tools what I can find on a specific set of dates, generally about a month out. So you're kind of hopefully picking up some of the lower priced fares. So you're not within the 14-day restriction or 7-day restriction type windows. So that's where these numbers come from. So these fares were basically researched last Friday, And the travel dates are February 9th through February 16th. So it's a Tuesday. I generally also try to do a midweek just to, again, try to find the lower fares. So this is basically what things were for the month. And we see that basically Manistee shows up as the lowest in roughly a third of the 20. Grand Rapids, kind of another third. And then Traverse City's got a couple and Muskegon's got one. Basically the things that are bold are which airport has the lowest in that particular market. And then at the bottom are kind of the averages across those 20 markets. And they're actually relatively close right now. Average out of Grand Rapids was 235. Average out of here was 244. And average out of Traverse City was 265. Muskegon's just got some significant issues with their current schedule and actually being able to make connections, especially to West Coast right now. And then the lines below that kind of really show how things have changed over the last couple months. So versus last month, pretty much we, Traverse City and Grand Rapids, all pretty much went up about the same amount. Muskegon went up more than that. And versus 2 months ago, a little bit more of a mix. And then in the lower part of this, you know, because we do have free parking and none of our other regional airports have that luxury. Since we're talking a 7-day booking here, I throw in 7 days worth of parking and just kind of see how that shifts things. And as you see, if you include the cost of 7 days of parking at any of the airports, we are now the cheapest in 18 of the 20 markets. So overall, you know, this is the best pretty much I've ever seen. I've been saying this the last couple of months. I suspect a lot of this is COVID related. Nothing about air travel is at all normal or fare pricing is normal. So I'm curious to see how this changes once things settle down. So, but that is what it is right now. Any questions?
Good.
Okay, I think I have to do this 3 times. Okay, I don't have really any update here. The ALP airport layout plan update project is continuing. The PFAS testing, we've been starting to get billed from that as came up in the financials. And just so that the board knows, the grant that is paying for that PFAS testing, and Cindy, if you're unfamiliar, PFAS, can't really even recall what that stands for, but it's some long chemical name. And it's basically a set of chemicals that are emerging as being impactful to health. And they are a chemical in firefighting foam that airports have used, and airports are required on an annual basis to test their equipment. So basically for the last number of years, these chemicals have been dispensed into the environment, and now airports are one of the areas that are being scrutinized for potential contamination. So, and because the airport has a city water well on it, that kind of doubles some of the scrutiny. So anyway, the state environmental department, Eagle, jointly with MDOT Aeronautics, has basically a grant program this year to fund this testing at all commercial air service airports. Our grant was approximately $200,000. Unlike federal grants, this is a state grant being funded through state funds. So we actually are on the hook to pay the invoices as they come in and then get reimbursement. Whereas with federal grants, the state basically facilitates all payments, and we basically are not involved in needing reimbursement for federal grants. But for this grant, we are. And because it's $200,000, it's, potentially a significant impact to our cash flow. Now, fortunately, with how we integrate into the county, that essentially means that we may need to borrow additional funds from the county on a short-term basis to cover some of these things, which is kind of normal operating procedure. I've reached out to Susan just to make sure that she and I have a plan in place so that we get reimbursed as quickly as possible on this. Unlike a recent project a couple years ago, which was the land acquisition, which was kind of a similar project, even though that was federally funded, its rules are different. In that project, we couldn't get reimbursement until the project was complete. In this project, we can get reimbursed through the course of the project. So we can collect a few invoices, submit them for reimbursement. So the delay in reimbursement should be much less than it was, because at that time we formally request a loan from the county because we knew it was going to be a year plus before we'd be able to repay it.
Okay, let me break in. I've got to drop out of the meeting. I've got an EDC meeting that I've got to join because I chair that one. So if something comes up, let me know, Jerry. And Jerry,
Yes.
please, when you're done with this, reach out yourself to Andrew. I've emailed him a couple of times during the course of the meeting to let him know that we've saved a seat for him. So hopefully he gets that application in by the end of the day today. I think today was the deadline. So with that, we'll talk to you folks later.
Okay, Jeff, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you, Jeff.
you. Yep.
Barry, one question. On these expenses and so on, you're talking, is that why Susan added this one line on the revenue and expenses to help?
It is a contributing factor, yes.
Okay,
I mean,
good.
over the last 6 months, she and I have worked on trying to straighten out past projects and making sure that we're actually getting reimbursed for everything that we should be.
Right,
And better reporting will help aid that going forward.
right. So it keeps it out front there. I like that. So it doesn't get buried.
Yep.
Good.
Okay, Cape Air service update. So overall, Cape Air is settling in. And in the scope of things, I talked earlier about the Christmas meltdown, 6% flights canceled. We've seen a lot worse as it relates to our air service. So it's not like it's the end of the world, but it's not what we've been led to expect, nor is it, quite frankly, what Cape Air views they should be providing. So there are issues that are being worked. So I already talked about the second point, December employments, on-time performance, number of canceled flights. So this meeting that was held last week with Cape Air management, they had a PowerPoint presentation that they walked through to kind of present, in some ways, some of the more positive things about what's going on, and also then getting into the negative. So my next two slides actually go into their slides from that presentation.
Oh, you got that one. Okay, good.
So this was very interesting. So this is showing 7 of the airports they serve that are EAS, so like us, that are smaller. So they basically have 3 flights a day, the 6 airports, and then we only have 2. And really show for the first 3 months where we compare to these other airports that are our size in their system as it relates to enplanements. And basically, they are ecstatic with how well they are performing. And again, This is with 2 flights a day at Manistee. All these other airports have 3 flights a day. So we are doing better than all of the similar airports for Cape Air out of the gate in the middle of the pandemic. And it wasn't part of this, but I looked it up just because I was curious, just to make sure that these airports were our size. And 2 years ago, we did a roughly 12,000 total passengers. And these airports range from 10,000 total passengers up to 20,000 total passengers. So there are some that are nearly twice our passenger numbers. So there's 2 that are kind of bigger. And then the other 4 are kind of really close to being our size. So this is really a good representative set of airports. And again, they're very, very pleased with how the community has responded to the service. Then this next slide they presented, and it was interesting. When it was presented during the meeting, I didn't really think much of it. A follow-on conversation that I had with Andrew Bonney, their VP, actually made me rethink this a little bit. So as it relates to cancellations, there are 2 kinds of cancellations. There's weather, things that are uncontrollable, and then there are controllable, which are things like, mechanical, pilots being sick, whatever is basically not an act of God type thing. So things that are controllable, we, over this period, and I believe this is the 3 months, had 2.5% of our flights canceled for controllable reasons, which from an overall perspective is actually pretty good. Again, especially given our history and our carriers, that's actually, probably better than average for many of our carriers. But what's interesting is this note over to the side here that is in this same period, Cape Air system-wide operated 99.9%. So system-wide, they canceled 0.1%. In Manistee, they canceled 2.5%. We're 25 times more cancellations than the rest of their system. And as Andrew pointed out to me, they serve roughly 30 airports. So if we're 25 times the average, most of the cancellations that are happening throughout Cape Air's entire network are happening in Manistee. And this has gotten their attention, and they are doing a lot to try to solve this problem, because there's no reason that Manistee should be any different than other airports in their system as it relates to this specific thing. There are some issues that are coming up that are basically being discussed. So let me see if I'm going to stay on this slide. So one of the outcomes of that meeting, and again, that meeting was with their CEO, their founder, most of their executive committee. So it became very clear as I kind of went through my laundry list of issues. Every time I brought up something, the response was they are aware of it and are working it. So the good news is they're aware at the highest levels in the company of our issues. Nothing I brought up was new to them. Unfortunately, they haven't been able just to wave a magic wand and make everything better. So things they are doing is when they started service here, we are a little bit unique in our service in that their main hub in the Midwest is St. Louis. So all of the airports they serve have at least one flight a day into St. Louis. So they do basically all of their maintenance for the Midwest in St. Louis. Because we have service into Chicago, and they do also have another airport that has service in Chicago, but it has then both. It has St. Louis and Chicago. We're now one hop away from that maintenance base. And time-wise, we're a little bit farther away as well. So the processes that they had in place don't work as well for us because of that distance, the fact that we don't have a daily flight into their maintenance base to swap out airplanes, et cetera. So when they started, in recognition of that issue, they decided that they were going to base 2 aircraft here. So we've got the Technum and then a backup Cessna 402. So we've got 2 planes here. So if there's a maintenance issue, there's a spare plane. As it relates to recent events, they've decided that they're going to station 3 aircraft here. So we are now going to have a Technum and 2 Cessna 402s as backups based here for the foreseeable future. Right now, I believe I've got 5 Cape Air aircraft on our airfield. They are certainly not skimping resources to solve this problem. There are people all over this. There are planes all over this. So one might ask, why are we having all these issues? Diplomatically, what I will say is it's becoming apparent that there is an HR issue with a specific Cape Air employee operating their flights that is causing flights to be canceled for perceived, and I use that word with a little emphasis, but I'm trying to be very vague, perceived safety issues. So, for example, over the weekend, 3 Cape Air aircraft by this individual were deemed not able to fly. When maintenance came in and looked, maintenance could not find any issues. So that issue is being addressed, but because it revolves around safety, every issue has to be treated. Everything that's reported has to be retreated as a completely valid and correct issue because it involves safety. So that is why we have 5 airplanes here right now, is there will be a plane that is able to fly at any given time. And I think they're transitioning in probably for the short term to have basically a full-time mechanic here from St. Louis, so that if something gets reported, it can be dealt with immediately as opposed to having to send the airplane off to maintenance. So as a result of that, we did have another cancellation yesterday. The notes in my ARF log from basically my staff are pilot didn't want to fly. So that kind of gives you a sense of the perception that people have as to the root cause of a lot of the issues. So I'm trying to be vague because it's an HR issue, and but I'm trying to also give an accurate sense of what's going on. Any questions on that?
I was just going to say, Barry, thanks for that update. And yes, for the area you're going into, you have to be a little vague and so on because there's not absolute proof in some of the things that are going on here, but that's good in what you said. And I gotta say that Cape Air is sure trying to cover things and correct things to the best of their ability and as quick as possible.
And, an example of that, so out of our meeting last week, I am now have a regularly scheduled meeting with Andrew Bonney every other Monday morning. That happened to be this morning. So we went through all of the weekend's events, including Sunday's canceled flight, a delay on Friday, some training issues and other things. And my first question to him was, because every day they have a management meeting to talk amongst their executive team, issues in the company. And I said, so was Manistee talked about this morning? He said, Manistee was 60% of our time was talked about. So we are getting the attention, and I am very confident that these issues are going to be addressed. But there's a process that needs to be followed to do it correctly. And Jerry, you were in the meeting last week. Do you have any other perceptions of that meeting and Cape Air's response?
I'm just going to say that, Barry, what you said and what I picked up in the meeting when we were on with them, I've got to say, I was very impressed at the amount of staff that they put out there to talk with us. And they do definitely have a very strong concern. And you'll see that in the first slide that you put up, Barry, which was pretty impressive in terms of the numbers of flights out of this airport versus some of their other ones. So they've got a lot of stake, you might say, in this airport and to make sure things run well or better than what we're seeing here. So that's it. It was a good discussion. Let's put it that way.
Yep. Good. That leads me into this next topic. So one of the issues that's come up in the last 10 days as we work through all of these things, right now is probably not as important as other things, but there is an issue that's come up around snow shoveling as it relates to hangars. So Cape Air is now leasing the former Ted Ahrens hangar that the airport acquired last summer. And that's where they house the Technum. And our snow clearing procedures here at the airport are that with the equipment we have, we clear up to the hangar door a reasonably close distance, 1, 2, maybe 3 feet if we know we're not being as diligent. So as we clear snow away from hangars, there's going to be a little bit of snow left in front of the door. And that's been our procedure for forever. And that has come up as an issue with Cape Air, is that they are expecting us to clear all of that snow out. And I'm basically saying no, that's not the way we do things. They're pushing back for a variety of reasons. One is their pilot union contract doesn't have snow shoveling in it. So their pilots are basically saying they can't shovel a little bit of snow. They don't like their station people here to be out on what's called the air side, basically on, dealing with the aircraft themselves. They prefer the pilots do that type of stuff. So their pilots are the ones that taxi and park the plane in the hangar at night, not station crew. So So one might say, well, what's the big deal? It's just a little bit of snow shoveling, which is true. But this is all about, as I mentioned earlier, my concerns around getting that first morning flight out there during winter operations. So at 6 in the morning, 6:30 in the morning, when that plane needs to leave the hangar to basically get in position to get out on time, Cape Air has 4 people here, 2 people manning the station, the pilot and co-pilot. The airport has 1 person, and that 1 person is primarily responsible for making sure that the runways are cleared and safe. Secondarily responsible for other surfaces like the ramps, getting snow pulled away from the hangar, as I mentioned, except for that little couple foot strip. And also that person ultimately, because of how Cape Air fuels, needs to break away from doing all those other things and fuel the aircraft. I am just concerned that we will take significant delays if we agree to snow clearing as being our responsibility as the lessor of the hangar. So I've kind of dug my heels in on this a bit, but I told Andrew and Cape Air that I would bring it to the board for your input because you may feel very differently. So did that explain things clear enough?
Yes, it has. And I'm going to say, Barry, until we know other things and so on, I'm suggesting you continue down the path you're going at right now, path you're on. With respect to suggesting that some of these, one or two or something of these 4 people that are over there on Cape Air side work on some snow removal at the same time as the airport employee from your side is working on other things.
And, you know, there is a middle ground here, and I'm willing to compromise a little bit. But one of the things that's still outstanding is we don't have a lease signed for the hangars, and they're trying to get language into the lease that says this is solely our responsibility. And that's kind of why I'm taking a harder line. I'm more than happy to, as it makes sense, to, you know, help. It's just that critical time period in the morning when we really need to be snow plowing, not outside the truck taking 20 minutes to shovel or 10 minutes to shovel. And specifically, if you think about an airplane, so think about a hangar is basically just a big garage with a garage door. The vehicle, in this case, an airplane, needs to come in and out. Unlike a car, which basically has 2 wheels that are in kind of tracks, an airplane basically has 3. All that really needs to happen at 6:30 in the morning is to shovel 3 2-foot strips where the wheels go. And we're actually going through the process now of painting lines at all of the hangars that Cape Air is leasing, because they've got some issues with their ability to park aircraft too. So it's really probably like 2 to 3 minutes worth of work to just shovel that out. That's all you need to do to get the plane out. Then later in the morning, after they're gone and we're done plowing, we could go in and clean up the rest. It's just at that critical time in the morning, 6:30 in the morning, when a lot of other things need to get done, I don't want to be committing and saying, yes, we will do that too. So that's more of my thoughts on this.
How have they gotten it done recently. Luckily, we haven't had a lot of snow.
We haven't had a lot of snow. They've basically just pulled the aircraft without shoveling it out, and then that packs it down. So now you've got ice buildup. So then they're complaining about that. You know, but we've really only had one significant snowfall. And
Right.
so, and come to think of it, that happened really over the Christmas meltdown where they weren't flying anyway. So
Buy them a bag of salt.
well, we can't, salt and aircraft don't mix, so we
That's right.
cannot use anything that's corrosive on the airfield.
Strike that.
So I'm bringing it to your attention. If anyone has additional thoughts, please feel free to reach out to me. I told them that I would get back to them after this meeting with kind of both my further thoughts on this as well as any insight I gained from the board.
So Barry, what I'm hearing that you're willing to do this script type deal for a while, or what?
I mean, I
No,
would
you're
say
not.
for now, I mean, if we can come to some sort of reasonable compromise, I would say let's do that for the rest of this winter. I mean, we're already halfway
Okay.
through the winter.
Right.
Realistically,
talked-
we've got 6 more weeks, and then, yeah, we'll have a couple snows after that. But, you know,
Have you talked to Andrew on this?
yes,
After talking to us on this?
I have talked to him twice about this.
So what was his response?
They've met internally about this and are pushing back very hard on this.
So we're pushing back and they're pushing back, so it might be the compromise in between there where we clean off the 2-foot strips and then come back later in the afternoon when everything is calmed down to clean the rest of it.
That may be, I mean, that's what I'm hoping. Now, how we put that language into the lease for the hangar, that I'm not sure of, but at least we can get an agreement as to what happens, and then we can figure out how the language should work.
Well, if you can live with that, I can live with that for first go around to see what happens.
Yep. Okay.
I'll-
Thank you for that
The
input.
rest of the board. Any other comments from the rest of the board? Okay, Barry,
Okay.
move forward then.
Moving on then. I've kind of already talked about this. January is looking good. I'm thinking that we could equal in January the number of passengers we did in December, which is really unheard of. January is usually our slowest month by January and February are usually our slowest months by far. But because December was really depressed with basically the don't travel message, things are, loosening up noticeably. In fact, I keep track on a daily basis of bookings, and the bookings for last week, so basically the first full week of January, were the best first week of January since I've been keeping track. So basically in the last 9 years, we sold more tickets the first week of January than we've sold the first week of January in any of those previous 8 years. So that's really encouraging, especially since we're in a still a COVID environment. So there are bright spots. I mean, I've been focusing on kind of all these negatives that if we can get addressed, really make things really look good. But even with those kind of issues I've been talking about, there are some bright spots to be looking at. Also, and this was talked about at our meeting with Cape Air last week, the Technum issues are still there. We got a lot better explanation as to actually what's going on. I've been telling the board that this is basically a certification issue with the aircraft and not being able to fly when it's snowing. There's more to it than that. sounds like a miscommunication between Cape Air, the aircraft manufacturer, and the FAA on this topic. Cape Air's version is that FAA gave them one set of guidance and then at the last minute changed their mind and is now asking for something else. Regardless of how we got here, there is a path forward, and that path forward is that Cape Air is going to adopt a formal de-icing plan with the FAA, and that will resolve this issue. And again, this issue is that if it is any form of freezing precipitation, snow, sleet, ice, on when the aircraft's on the ground, the Technum is not currently able to fly. If it's in the air, it can fly, certified to fly through icing. It's a known icing certified aircraft. The issue is on the ground where de-icing processes come into play. So right now, that means on a normal year, we wouldn't be flying the Technum at all because it pretty much snows here every day. We've been actually very fortunate that we've gotten the Technum to fly more than we would expect under those circumstances. Will the FAA get this reviewed and approved in time to impact this winter? To be seen, to be determined. I'm somewhat skeptical, although Cape Air seemed to indicate that I think the FAA realizes that they're a little bit at fault for the guidance they gave early on, and therefore are kind of fast tracking this. But with a federal agency, even fast tracking doesn't necessarily mean it happens anytime soon. So that's really the issue with the Technum. And, it is clear that from passenger feedback that the Technum is the preferred airplane from a comfort and a lot of other aspects. It's just a modern, better functioning aircraft for our role than the Cessna 402s are. And I already mentioned that out of our meeting, I now have regularly scheduled meetings with Andrew Bonney. One last thing, the current limitation around seat sales, we are still currently limited to selling only 8 seats on the 9-seat aircraft. That is scheduled to be raised to 9 seats as of 2/15. Again, we're not really going to run into that, most likely selling out seats in the rest of January or February, although there is a flight this weekend that is sold out at 8 that, if we had 9, probably we could accommodate one more passenger on it. This is really something that just got to get addressed before the summer when we're going to need every available seat possible.
Harry, just a question.
Yep.
With the Technum coming up on 2/15 where we can sell 9 seats in a plane,
Mm-hmm.
if because of the de-icing problem and so on, they jump to the Cessna, does that have 9 seats also?
It does, yes.
So they can handle the 9 seats
They
that
can
you
handle
sold?
9 on either aircraft.
Okay.
The issue is to operate the Technum pilot. The Technum's a new aircraft, so a lot of their crews are basically just being introduced to it, and they need a minimum number of hours in the airframe for this number to go up. So,
Okay.
so it's
I was just curious as to whether if we sold 9 seats, the other backup plane will handle the 9 seats that are sold.
It will. Yep.
Okay, good. That was it.
Okay. Car rental update. I don't really have much here. Our last meeting was 3 weeks ago. 2 of those weeks were basically holidays. So it's really just last week that I was really actively getting much progress on anything, and I didn't get back to Hertz yet. But the first note here is something I want to add is we were notified last week by Maori that one of the vehicles that needs some maintenance, basically needs new tires. They're pretty bald. And in winter, that's not a good thing. They've decided to pull the vehicle from the fleet instead of putting on new tires. So I'm thinking that may be an indication that
They're winding down,
they're winding down, yes.
right?
Which gets into the ad hoc committee's some of the items there, and just getting back in working with Hertz. Not really much here, although we had talked last month about having at a future meeting basically a presentation from Right Side Design Group on our marketing plan. Will that work for next month?
Let's try to squeeze it in there.
Okay.
Let's plan on at least a half an hour.
Okay, I will try to make that happen.
Okay, yes.
And
because
then since our last meeting, actually the day of our last meeting, we did have a fair sale, our winter solstice sale. And we were able to bump the needle a little bit on sales that day. Not too significantly, but a little bit. We noticed it. So, people are out there and receptive. It's just the booking window right now for people traveling is very short. I mean, when I'm seeing bookings happen, they're happening, 7 days out as opposed to 60 days out. So, it's hard to do a fair sale when your booking window is so tight. And then my last slide, this was already discussed earlier on the ad hoc committee appointment, but these are the three things that are on my list. Auto rental, air tour standards, and then aircraft maintenance standards if we were to attract aircraft maintenance to the airfield. So that's my report. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Barry. As Barry said, any questions of what he presented? If not, we'll move on to any other old business that we may have or somebody wants to bring up. I'm not aware of any at the moment. And moving on to new business. I'm also not aware of any new business that we haven't already kind of alluded to. And we'll be moving forward into. Anyone else? If not, I will call the meeting adjourned.
There's a second
Turn the
page to
page.
the agenda.
Oh, wait a minute. I forgot. Geez, almighty. Thank you. Oh, we do have one more bit of business to tend to. The next item is the meeting schedule for 2021 and then going into January of 22. Except for this month and next month, all the meetings are listed out on the third Monday of each month at noon. And I see no problem with that. So I guess we have to ask for a motion to approve those dates.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, Phil has made the motion and I will go ahead and second it. Julie, can we have a roll call on voting for the proposed meeting dates and times for 2021?
Sure. Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Miss Goodman,
Yes.
Mr. Haw,
Yes.
Mr. Suda,
Yes.
and Miss Kaminsky.
She's nodding her head, yes.
I read her lips.
Okay,
And did you ask for Ms. Goodman?
I did.
Okay.
I think I heard her say yes. Correct, Julie?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Any other comments by board members?
I have two quick ones. One, is there any idea when that ad hoc committee might meet?
Not, let's try to get something together in January or the first part of February. Does that suit you?
Oh, I'm fine. Yeah.
I'll give everyone a call or email everybody just to get something lined up. And the first meeting, just probably an hour or so to get things opened up and get started.
And my second comment is a welcome to Cindy. I know Cindy from when she worked for the airline years ago when I also worked at the airport. So I think she's got a good idea how that end of the things are going to work out. And just a word to her, there's going to be a lot of stuff that doesn't make any sense for a long time, but hang in there. It'll eventually start being clear. And welcome.
Okay. Anything else by board members? If not, I will call the meeting adjourned. Thank you. Everyone, thank you.
Thank you.